Hello and very welcome to this seminar. I'm Robert. In this seminar, we will cover the topic of employee choice and how we can attract and retain talent of offering employees the choice of work tool. Today, we will also be hearing about customer experiences with Jamf as a management tool, but also how Jamf and Microsoft work together to create a secure and smooth environment for both the end user and IT. Please also remember that you can anytime place questions in the chat, and we will discuss this in the Q&A by the end of the session. So as I said, I'm Robert. Very nice to meet you. And I'm a senior consultancy and CEO at Multitronic Pro. And before we start off, I want to present a quote from the late CEO of Apple, Steve Jobs, that describes something that's becoming more and more important for today's companies and enterprise organizations. This is a big part of what we call today HR marketing. Everything comes down to the importance on how to be able to use the tools we like in our jobs. This is by the end a benefit of the company, and will also create more effective people, and in many cases also attract more people to the company. And before we start off with the first presentation, I want to cover Multitronic Pro as a company. We are a company in Finland. We are providing consulting and hardware services all over Europe. And today we're working in about 15 countries. And we are a proud member of the Apple Consensus Network, and also been working with Jamf as an integrator for many, many years. And also have put our minds and thought into the integration of different systems together with the Apple platform. So our organization provides these services, support for IT organizations, IT as a service and end user support, but also project management around IT.
So I'm Benny from Jamf, and we are here to make and simplify work and make you succeed with your Apple deployments at scale, like Sami mentioned. I'm a sales engineer at Jamf. I've been here for 2 years and also worked with Apple about 20 years ago. It was a very different time, a very different scale from an Apple perspective, and also a very different scenario also from a cybersecurity perspective, which is something we need to take quite seriously. So our role, as I said, is here to simplify work, and we see IT admins and IT managers as superheroes a little bit, managing a very complex world with lots of fragmentation from a platform perspective. And based on that sort of baseline, we believe and have a huge respect for the existing investments that the customers have made. And quite often in this region, in this part of the world, it's Microsoft in different flavors. So that's what we're here to talk about today, and better together, how we approach these environments with our solutions. So I would like to give a few samples of how we integrate with Microsoft and how that makes sense. And before I do, I would like to make it very clear that we have a long list of partners on our partner portal, or the marketplace, as we call it. And it's based on the fact that we really truly respect those existing investments, and we don't wish to create new platforms, new silos, new containers, lots of more dashboards. We want to coexist in those existing systems when it makes sense and when it adds value, and still allow our customers to use the best of breed solution. And the reason I say that is that Jamf is found for the second consecutive year to be the best platform to manage Apple devices in a unified model. So that's super important. But you can see familiar names here. We have Google, we have Okta. A couple of my favorites, we have Splunk, the ability to stream data from our solutions to a Splunk dashboard, to give visibility to InfoSec teams, to IT leadership teams on what is happening and what is the status of the Apple devices. Macs have historically, especially Macs, I would say, have historically been a little bit of an outsider from an IT perspective. We haven't had that visibility into what's going on the device from a configuration perspective. Sometimes it's even up to the user themselves to configure, manage, and support the device. And that becomes sometimes problematic in the world we live in today, where cybersecurity is a very, very serious threat. And we see a lot of increase in malicious activities on the internet, even for the Macs. But for today, we're going to talk about the integration with Microsoft. So I would like to highlight maybe two major pieces here. It's the identity integration that we do with Microsoft, and that goes through all the way Jamf Pro for scoping and managing users, and also Jamf Connect, where we can actually associate the Mac user account, the local user account on the Mac, with the cloud identity. Something that seems very basic, but very few have started doing. So basically, you have the same identity, you leverage the same identity settings and policies on all your devices, including the Mac. Very, very powerful. And then perhaps the more important one, and there's a lot going on in this space at the moment. We announced a big update to this coming later this year. But for now, it's conditional access with Intune or Endpoint Manager. So we'd like to talk a little bit more about that. Device compliance for iOS is roughly the same thing, but adopted for iOS. Let's start with Jamf Connect and the onboarding experience of a new device and how we can empower the user to do its own onboarding and leveraging that identity with the cloud identity, regardless of it's Okta, Google, or in this case, Microsoft with Azure AD. So we automate this process, and there is no hand-holding required from IT, and that's why we call this a zero-touch deployment model. So zero-touch then is obviously from an IT admin perspective, and the user is doing his own or her own onboarding from start to finish. And the only thing the user needs to do is pretty much do some selections in the setup assistant, and of course, attach or connect to a Wi-Fi network, if not a physical Ethernet network. And then we see that this device will be managed, so this Mac will be managed by remote management with Jamf. And that's where the interesting thing starts, because then we can deploy Jamf Connect from the very beginning. So instead of the user creating its own user account locally by typing in its name, short name, and password, we authenticate to the cloud identity, in this case, Azure AD, and the user account is created by Jamf Connect. And also with the right settings in terms, is this user an admin user or a normal user? And this is important because historically and typically, Mac users are quite often admin because it sometimes simplifies things for IT and also the user. But is that desirable today when we need to perhaps have more security on our devices in general to avoid data loss and compromised devices? Another thing that happens with this workflow, which is really cool, is that we are able to enable file vault from the very beginning of the deployment of a new Mac. And for those of you who know Macs and are Mac users today, I would be willing to bet some money that you are hardly ever restarting or logging out and logging back in again from your Mac. That's a typical user behavior. We're used to this amazing performance where we can just close the lid on the Mac and open it, and we're back online with that computer in an instant. And that's very, very powerful. But that leaves a little bit of a security gap because the nature of file vault requires a logout and a login to be actually activated. So even if we look at a security dashboard and it says this device has file vault activated, yes, the setting is on, but we actually haven't started encrypting the storage medium yet. So that leaves a compliance gap, and most importantly, also a security gap because the data is wide open and available on that device. So that's a super important security feature in Jamf Connect, and the only way, as far as I know, to enable file vault without a logout and login. The other way we can leverage the cloud identity is from a management perspective in Jamf Pro. So we can integrate that directory and the tree in Azure AD to have groups, other information, department, status of that account. And we can use all this information when we scope configuration profiles, policies, and applications to that device from the MDM tool, Jamf Pro in this case. And that's super powerful to be able to leverage that directory, one single source of truth from the user perspective and where that user belongs in the organization. And this is all API level integration. We worked super hard on this and have quite a long partnership actually with Microsoft. Since 2017, we've had a very active collaboration where it's not just us doing things to support their API, but they also have some development resources supporting our teams. So it's a very, very good relationship. Let's talk about device compliance or conditional access, which is a really, really cool feature because that allows you as an organization to define the policies from a compliance perspective in one place. And in this case, it's Intune and Endpoint Manager, and that's where you define what are the compliance rules for the user to get access to email, for example, a simple example in this case, just for illustration purposes. So what happens is that we manage the Mac with Jamf. Why do we do that? Because we do that best. And some of you may think, well, why can't I just manage it with Endpoint Manager or Intune? Well, you can, but the user experience and the admin experience is very compromised because there's only a limited feature set supported in the MDM framework. And on top of that, we also have our own Jamf binary, which allows you as an IT admin to do so much more and improve the user experience for the end user so much more. And also, I should say, maintain that beautiful Apple user experience and without compromises. So there's some huge differences. So that's why we manage the Mac with Jamf. But what we do is that we register the Mac with Intune. And when we've done that successfully, Jamf will share a subset of the inventory data with Intune. So Intune has visibility, knowledge of the status of the device, and can use that status to determine whether the device is compliant or not against those policies that we've defined to access email, for example. If that is not the case, the user will be sent back to self-service, which is our application that we install on enrollment, and we can then have a workflow to remediate those policies or those compliance settings that are outside the scope from an Intune perspective. So very, very powerful integration. Just a quick walkthrough how that looks like. So we have the integration. Actually, I'll skip that in the interest of time. And then we have a little bit of a view of Intune or Endpoint Manager, what it looks like and the status of those devices we have not enrolled, but registered. So the distinction here is we are not enrolling the Mac in Intune. We're enrolling it in Jamf Pro and registering it and sharing that data with Intune. And then here we have the definitions of those compliance and how the Macs stack up. And we can see straight in the list of devices how the Mac is, whether it's green light or red light, basically. And before I wrap up, I would like to highlight a new feature that is coming, or a new model for this that is completely changing the game. So the Intune integration today requires a little bit of manual work for the registration process. So that is done entirely by the end user themselves. There is really not a good way today to automate that registration. And it involves a couple of steps of authentication. And every time we need to put hands on a device by the end user, we introduce some risk for mistakes, which then perhaps could lead to an unsuccessful registration and this scenario not working. So we worked really hard together with Microsoft, supporting their new API for device compliance. And this is going to be released later this fall. And just on a high level, what that means, we have a patented feature in Jamf Pro, which we call smart groups. It's the ability to allocate the device into a group dynamically based on the status in real time of that device. So for example, if a user for some reason changes a setting unknowingly that makes the device fall out of compliance, the device will then be allocated to that smart group, and we create visibility in Intune on that smart group, and immediately in real time we have a change of status. And why this is so important is because we are going towards zero trust models when it comes to accessing resources. So if then Intune is looking at a status that is perhaps not real time, there may be a little gap from a timing perspective, and we're allowing access to a resource, again, email as a simple example, and it's not based on true data, we're introducing more risk. So this is a feature, a new capability that is coming that is both simpler for IT, because it's building on an existing feature with smart groups that we have, and we're also introducing a new way of defining risk-based smart groups that are just looking at device risk and scoring the device from a risk perspective. So you can see here how important security and compliance is for us, and all the words that Sami used in his introduction, like creativity, innovation, those are still at the very heart and core of the Apple user experience and the spirit of Apple devices. But in the world we live in, we need to introduce those perhaps a little bit more square, a little bit more boring words like compliance and policies to make sure that we have full visibility and security on our Macs and Apple devices. And with that, I'd like to thank you so much for the time and introduce to Andreas from PAF.
Yes, thank you, Benny. Your presentation could have been a presentation of PAF's setup when it comes to our new Mac management environment. But first, I want to tell a little bit of the background of me and PAF. And I want to say that one of the most frustrating of experiences is having to wait. You know, we wait to get to the cash register, we wait in traffic jams, we wait for trains, buses, at the airport. Yeah, we wait and wait. My name is Andreas Henriksson, and I'm the manager of PAF's internal IT department. And today I'm going to talk about the importance of having knowledge and access to proper work tools. For example, a device management system. But first, a little bit a background about me. I'm in the industry for a couple of years, around 20 years. I've been working as an employee, as a e-commerce platform owner, and lately as an employee again in my current role as a manager for an IT department at PAF. And PAF, we are a gaming company, but we are a slightly different company because we are it for the long run. We care about our customers and the society we live in. We are an international gaming company founded on the Åland Islands. It's a small island, it belongs to Finland, but it's between Sweden and Finland in the Nordics. We were founded in 1966, and we offer entertainment in the shape of money gaming online, on cruise ships, and on land. We are a small company with nearly 350 employees from 30 different countries. Our headquarters is on Åland, but we serve players from countries including Finland, Sweden, Estonia, Latvia, and Spain. We were founded back in 1966, as I mentioned, by the Åland Public Health Service, Save the Children, the Red Cross, and a local children charity. So that's the background for PAF. And now we will go further, and I will discuss or tell you about our challenges and later our old setup and our current setup for Mac management. Yes, we go for the freedom of choice, and I would say it's not just about Windows or Mac, because employees are like everyone else. They value choice, and I think I read somewhere it's 94% of employees will choose a company that offers the ability of freedom of choice. And for the last couple of years, we have seen an increase of employees choosing Mac over Windows, even where there's more or less a hard requirement that they to choose differently. They want a Mac because they are familiar. They maybe use a Mac at home and they have an iPhone and so on. So that's why it's really important to give them the opportunity to use a familiar device. So that's something that we have chosen to do, and we have around 500 devices, and more than 50% of them are nowadays Macs. Almost all new developers are choosing Macs for their work tool. Yes, a second challenge that we have is when in a gaming industry, each market brings with its own specific regulations and licensing requirements. We need to support the policies and procedure that, for example, an ISO 27001 certification brings, and what our legal and compliance teams want us to comply with, or the market, of course. So that's one of the challenges, to ensure that we can follow every policy and procedure on the hardware side. And then a challenge that actually occurred for a little bit more than 2 years ago, when COVID suddenly appeared, and it became a game changer for the whole world, of course. And suddenly, from 1 week to another, or 1 day to another, we had to adapt to the thing called remote work, or lately called hybrid work. Luckily for us, since we have had offices in different countries and so on, we are used to having daily video meetings and so on, between co-workers and countries and departments and so on. But when it came to the IT department, we became pretty quickly aware of that our current MDM solution, onboarding solution, was not always zero touch. And also, when it comes to remote work, it's security. And security-wise, we had to figure out a good way how to ensure that all the devices that we have are compliant. And also, compliant means that, for us, it means that if a computer isn't compliant, you can't access PAF networks. So we did this on the Windows side with Intune, and now we can do it on the Mac side also with Intune and Endpoint Manager to get compliant devices and be able to access our networks through a VPN solution. And our fourth, one of our challenges, but our former CTO here at PAF, Francois Maugy, he came up with the idea that he wanted to start a coding school. Since it's really hard to get developers in the Nordics, we needed to do something, and his idea was to create a coding school here on the Åland Islands, and that bring up a new challenge for us. Suddenly we had 70 students and a little bit over 70 iMacs to handle in a really good way. And yeah, I will show you how we did that. But first, I want to tell a little bit about how we did before. I think we have had a really complex setup consisting of repository hosting services. You have a code editor on your machine, automation servers, of course, MDM system, and then cloud services for storing installation packages and also for publishing managed software center. And all these different components was built and maintained by the IT department. You can probably imagine the amount of time and effort it took for a new team member to be able to handle the Mac management system. That ended in just having one or two people in the department that were able to handle our Mac management system. And that resulted in frustrated and stressed support technicians that needed to wait for those few users or employees that could handle the Mac management system. And of course, unhappy users. Due to the nature of the setup, it was also really hard to find good consultants to help us to tune in and develop our setup further. So, and now, how do we do things now? We are now using Jamf Pro with and we have enabled Jamf Connect with Azure AD authentication. Everything happens in the Jamf Pro. I guess there are different systems in the background, of course, but for us, or for me especially, it's very important that all my employees can handle all the systems that we have, at least have a good knowledge about it. So the result for us for moving to Jamf Pro was that first everyone had access. It was really easy to get access to the portal. We could really briefly introduce them to how everything worked and how to look at in logs and to see the status of devices and so on. And all this resulted in lower stress levels and of course increased performance. If we go from 2 persons that can handle the Mac management to 6-7 persons, so the performance for the IT department increased dramatically. Really nice to hear or to be a part of. And of course, the most important thing for us, happy users, happy co-workers. So a really good decision from our side to change system. Thank you.